Hi, everybody. In this episode of Two Chaps, Many Cultures, episode 73, mind you, we're going to discuss the spaces between us. What's appropriate? How close is too close? How far is too far? Let's check it out. Is this too close?
I don't know. Is this too far?
How are you, everybody? Welcome to the Wednesday edition, is it? Yes, the Wednesday edition, 73 of Two Chaps, Many Cultures. How are you, sir?
I am excellent. Hope you're doing well as well.
Oh, fine and dandy. Fine and dandy. Had a dance party last night, believe it or not.
I watched you there for a second, and then I decided, oops, maybe not.
It was, if you're talking about a virtual dance party and you think, how do you pull that off? It was actually, people didn't want to leave. And if you can believe that or not, that was how it turned out. And it was fun. So I know people out there might not know what we're talking about, the end of the CETA USA conference. And of course, in person, we would always do a bit of a gala and a bit of a party. And in this case, that we did it virtually, and it was a lot of fun. People all around the world jumping on at different times, and we're playing music and
Nice.
lots of frivolity. Anyway, so of course, if we were in person and we had people from all around the world, there might be discussions about what's appropriate in terms of how close we might stand together, dance together, interact with each other, depending on whether it's a person we know or whether it's a person we've just met or a business associate, yeah?
Or whether we know how their last COVID test turned out.
That's right. In current situations, yes, of course.
How close do we get? So
Yeah.
the whole question around what type of space between people is the proper space has, of course, taken a turn in 2020 due to pandemical reasons. However, we have developed new social protocols. That doesn't change, though, the really deeply entrenched behaviors we have. I notice this. I don't know if how much you see that happening when I meet somebody and there is this immediate, with me at least, this immediate reflex. I don't even think about it. I am about to stretch out my hand to shake somebody else's hand. And now I've learned over the last couple of months to correct myself and then do, I don't know, a fist bump or either probably better, even a elbow check or whatever the surrogate for the handshake is. However, my desire, my default setting of behavior would be extend the hand an arm's length or angled arm's length and extend my hand for a handshake, because for me in my culture, that is a sign of trust. That is a sign of building rapport, of mutual respect, and it would be accompanied probably with a looking each other into the face, into the eyes, and that would be normal for me. What's normal for you, Brett?
I think the same thing, absolutely. And the firm handshake is sometimes even used by women, is oftentimes used as a sense of this: I'm welcoming you, I trust you, I see a connection with you, even if it's a person that you don't know. And but there are many cultures, and this gets into the different cultures. We can really simplify it and separate cultures into touch and no touch. Say with Latin American cultures where touch is appropriate, and other cultures like Northern European where touch is not so appropriate, at least for people you don't know. And then maybe we can kind of get a little bit lower then and dig down a little bit deeper and say, now, what is appropriate between a friend, a very, very close friend, or a family member, a complete stranger, and also maybe an acquaintance, maybe someone you work with. There might be that three-legged stool where where in some cultures the distance between all three of those is the same. I mean, in some cultures it varies completely. So this is something you have to observe when we're in person. This is relative, and when you have to kind of be cognizant of this and observe what's going on around you when you find yourself in these spaces that are not naturally comfortable for you.
Right. And with the handshake, I think there's even, as you said, there are nuances as to how do I shake hands? Do I shake hands with everybody? If we're in a handshaking context, that is. So in mine, and probably similar in yours, Central European context, handshake is the default, or the quote unquote normal behavior. However, I moved to the United States, North America, where handshaking also seems to be somewhat of the default behavior in terms of greetings. And I noticed that Americans shake hands differently than Europeans. So even within that same, or what appears to be the same context, there are nuances that I was not prepared for, that I learned to adjust to. So in my native culture, especially when it's a business setting, imagine you're entering a meeting room and there's more than 3-4 people, maybe it's 10, 15, depending on the size of the room. In my culture, it would be appropriate to really, quote unquote, work the room, walk around. I would shake everybody's hands. And I would typically start with the people that are closest to me in space. If I know the pecking order in the room, if I know what the hierarchical positions are, then I might gravitate towards the people that have a similar status as I do. So I would start building rapport with people who are at the same height of the totem pole as I am, and then probably ask that person to introduce me to somebody who is in a higher position of hierarchy, and then would shake that person's hands, right? So that there are quite some nuances, and I was laughed at when I first interacted in North American rooms, because not only did I shake hands when I entered the room with everybody, I also had this desire to shake hands to say goodbye,
right?
Which was not expected of me, apparently, in this North American room, because people had just left, and I was standing there hoping to, hey, did we not seal the deal, or do we not say bye? Oh, okay, ciao, as you go. So I was like, oh, okay, they probably don't do this. So I was told later by an American, well, you Germans, you shake everything that has a pulse. So there might be some truth to I'm not so sure. So there's a little bit of nuance and difference in the handshaking as well, as it is with other forms of greetings. So some of you may have heard the term, do we kiss, do we bow, do we shake hands? Some of you may even have read a book about it. It kind of looks like this, or like that. I'm not saying this is the end all be all instrument for learning about behavioral differences across cultures. It might be a good first entry into this, right? So you dip your toes into some cold water, maybe start with that book, might be quite interesting and helpful. I'm not gonna say this is not good. It's simply that this is surface level stuff if you're dealing with cultural differences, but this might be a good indicator as to how much you want to pay attention to the differences in greeting styles. Where would you bow, Brett? Have you ever been in an environment where it was required for you to, instead of shaking hands, to bow?
Well, certainly, yes. Of course, we know that the Japanese culture, probably the top culture in the world, that bowing is an expression of respect and fealty in a very hierarchical culture. That is very cognizant of the position of the people that interact with each other, and then not so much maybe in China, a place like China, where bowing is kind of a part of the culture also, but not as much, not as pronounced. And so there is a nuance between two cultures that have bowing, but they're not expressed as strongly. And so these are something, again, you just need to take a step back and observe. And of course, as I always like to ask people, to find yourself a cultural concierge in your environment that can be your translator across those differences to help you. And it just gives you a bit of an insight into how that you could appropriately interact and keep the respect the spaces that are expected in those cultures. And even though that the people you interact with may not mentally or consciously be aware of it, subconsciously, this is how deep the human behavior goes. Subconsciously, it makes them feel comfortable, and it gives and it just opens the door for a more open relationship at the very start, even if it's not consciously thought about.
And the subconscious thing is it's so deep. We may think on a conscious level, we may think, this is I can correct this wrong first impression, or the first impression that I got from this other person is probably a cultural difference, and never mind, and we'll figure this thing out. So my conscious tells me it's not a big deal. It's not a deal breaker, deal maker. Yet subconsciously, I know for myself, I remember this stuff. I will remember a bad first impression based on the greeting, based on the space between us. And those of you who know me better have probably heard this story before, but I had, in my previous profession, I had the opportunity to meet a rather let's say famous person, a celebrity. He was born Sean Carter, but most people know him as Jay-Z. And when I first met Jay-Z in his hotel room and extended my hand to shake his, I got a very limp hand to hold in my hand. I would call it the dead fish. So he did not reciprocate the gentle squeeze. So I did not get what's referred to as a firm handshake, and it left an impression with me that lingered on for years. And whenever I thought of Jay-Z, I thought of that moment. It's almost like an anchor that anchored that memory. Now I know he was jet lagged, and there was many other circumstances that led to this. So no bad feelings. Jay-Z, if you're watching this, it's all good. You can call me again. It's fine. I'm over it now. Okay, it's good. But it's
sure.
Yeah, I am. But it's what I'm telling this story because our subconscious registers this, and we decide how we want to extend trust to somebody based on that first interaction. I'm curious to hear from our audience who have more experience with Asian cultures, especially with Japanese culture, about the bow, because I was told that I was doing it wrong. So when I first met people, Japanese people in a business context, I did the bow because I thought, hey, Christian, you learned a thing or two, so you do the bow. And then a friend of mine took me aside later and said, it's great that you do the bow. However, you want to make sure that you angle yourself, that you hinge at your hip and don't let your shoulder slump. You basically make a stiff back, and you bow at your hip, right? And how deep you bow, and how long you bow, and where your hands are in regards to the rest of your body. All of this plays into it, and that's how people who are not familiar with the greeting in that other culture may be doing it wrong, right? Just like my wrong bow might just be like a dead fish handshake. So it's really important that we do it properly, right? And the same goes for kissing, right? Kissing, yes or no? I get these questions all the time when we do cultural training. People go into Italy, Spain, France, Switzerland, or South America. Do I kiss? And if so, how do I kiss? Well, how do you kiss, Brett? How do you kiss, Brett?
But now we're getting into very personal questions. I think maybe meet and greets is probably a whole other episode. We really dig in. This would be really fun. But it is, how often do we hear that the discomfort between that when we're greeting somebody and somebody reaches out to you and to give you, a peck on the cheek? Is it one? Is it two? All this kind of stuff. And that in itself can impose, or stretch across the line of what you consider appropriate as far as distance is concerned. And then I guess one part of it is how do we, again, back to the cultural concierge, the people around you that can give you this education, like you said, people pulled you aside and said, there's maybe a different way you could approach this. Obviously, somebody, if you're a politician, and we're just going to pull up this, there was obviously somebody who was very, very attuned to this, who prepared George Bush. Yeah, can we look around the side? I don't know.
Who is this?
Who is this? With George Bush, who obviously said, prepared the president for these interactions, because it would be unusual in the US culture to walk around holding hands with another man, right? In terms of like the business setting, it's natural, obviously, but it's somebody obviously took the time to culturally educate and around the protocols and what would be really appropriate in this sense, in a very respectful way, across cultures. But of course, the same president, who is a very folksy kind of guy, who's a wonderful, warm Texan, who brings his somewhat even Latin American type of approach to interactions, and then he does something like this. Right?
Yeah, that didn't go over well. Yeah.
Right. So obviously, the Angela Merkel here, that she doesn't look comfortable, and why would that be, sir?
Well, and then there are two things at play, or two different cultural baskets, right? One is the folksy North American or Texan who thinks he's already built up rapport with another global leader. He's being chummy with another country head, and so that's that difference or distance there. That's a space between the two. And then there's the gender thing, right? So there's male, female, and is it appropriate to do this? And I haven't talked to Miss Merkel about this yet.
Next week maybe she'll have some time.
I've got to get on her calendar. But from the looks of it, she did not appreciate that approach. So it does not. It's not only nationality or regionality in the world how we define the space between people. There are also other aspects at play: gender, age, hierarchy, professional context, right? So do I touch somebody, or do I stand closer to somebody that I am negotiating with? Or is this somebody of a higher authority than me? Do I need to get away? My parents keep telling me the story when they first visited Indonesia, how surprised they were, how there was a big family gathering that they were invited to, 50 or more people, and they were surprised how the children of the host, adult children of the host, during the whole meal, never raised their head above the head of their parents. No matter how they approached the table or that space in which the meal at the party was served, the younger family members, in a sign of respect, always made sure that their head was lower than that of their parents. And if that meant they needed to crawl on the floor, then that's what that meant. And my parents were so surprised by this behavior that they thought, well, do we have to do that too? Are we now supposed to crawl here? That no, you're the guests. You're the guests of honor. To you, this does not apply. This is a family dynamic. So different standards. How do you know this? As you said, you want to have a concierge. You want to have a coach. You want to have somebody that is a liaison that can explain this to you and give you the context that is required. right?
Absolutely.
What does Christina say? In Germany, you don't do that normally. It's kind of inappropriate. Yes, it's yeah. You wouldn't do that with somebody that you don't know that well. However, if Angie and Georgie had spent the day at the, I don't know, Baltic coast and they had a couple of cold beers together, they might do that differently. Who knows?
Right. Absolutely. Yep. So it's the message is, I guess, generally there will be differences. There will be contrasts in how close, how far people might stand with each other when they interact with each other. And of course, this is a learning curve. If you're the new person in a culture new to you, it is this always brings in what we always talk about, the observational aspect of watching what's going on around you.
Right.
Getting somebody who can coach you in this and to help you in preparing you for this, and also just to not overthink it. Again, if you are going to be, if you're in a situation where they're used to foreign people in different settings, don't put too much pressure on yourself. I mean, we tend to overthink. There's a lot of my clients say, I just don't want to screw up. I don't want to be disrespectful. And I think that if you're humble, we always bring in this aspect of humility, curiosity, genuine attempts at being respectful, then you're going to go a long way in your interactions in different cultures. And of course, the message is just not to overthink it, and but learn about it, because it's quite fun. It's quite fun to.
When you say observation, I think that this is really the critical part. It's easy to say, well, I'm going to observe and I'm going to keep an open eye and I'm going to be nimble and agile and I'll respond. Yeah, you might think that of yourself. I challenge you, anyone who's watching this, I challenge you, observe with people that you know well around you, people that you've interacted with before. Observe how close they get to you or how far they keep their distance. It may not be the same. And when I say observe, check in with yourself. How well do you adjust in the moment? Because observation in hindsight will be illuminating. Yeah, hindsight is 2020. Yeah, this is what happened half an hour ago. Then the situation is already passed. How good are your observational skills in the very moment? And this is something that comes with mindfulness. This is something that we can practice, being in that moment and trusting yourself to be okay with something that may not be normal to you. I'll never forget when I first negotiated, or when I first interacted. It was not a negotiation. When I first had interactions, deep conversations with people from South America, in this case, particularly Argentina, and I had known about it. So my conscious mind had learned about, Argentinians stand close together when they talk. When it happened in the moment, I was still surprised, right? I was still like, this dude is getting really close. So my subconscious was telling me, this is getting really close. And I noticed myself moving away. And in the moment when I caught myself moving away and felt him or saw him catching up with me, I recognized, oh, that's what's going on. Man, you knew about this. Why are you moving away from that person? So I was hard on myself first, but then I caught myself in the moment and let it happen, even though it was a bit too close for me, but it was okay. So know your outcome, right? If your desired outcome is to close a deal or to build trust with that person, then allow your observation and your mindfulness to respond in kind. If that is not on your agenda, I'm not going to force you to hold hands or kiss or bow. If that is not important to you, then by all means, do it as you want to do it and see where it takes you.
Absolutely.
Know your outcomes.
Absolutely. I mean, in China, we had the office that I used to visit quite a lot, and there was a manager there, and she was lovely, and they were all wonderful. But the manager there, Isabel, she was wonderful. But I used to say to her, "You always owe me one hug before I leave every time," which was certainly not in their culture. But I said, look, I understand that it is, you know, it's not a cultural, it's a cultural thing, and it certainly made her uncomfortable. But it was a way of me connecting with her also, because she knew it was coming when I was leaving the office and I had my bag packed and I was heading to the airport. She knew it was coming, and she would sometimes jokingly preempt it and say, "Okay, Brett, time for my hug." and so it can also be a great way to kind of to bring connectedness once you get to know your colleagues or your even clients in those settings, where it now becomes a point of connectedness. So that's humility, I guess, from my point of view. Being Australian and being self-deprecating comes with my culture, so I give it up. I say, you know, but I'm just an Aussie at heart. You know, you've got to let me give you a hug.
But what you did in that case, it sounds like this was a business relationship, and the two of you came to an agreement. What is the right way of space between you, two individuals, regardless of your passport culture or passport background? You decided, two individuals, what is the appropriate space between the two of us that respects both of us and still allows us to be close.
Absolutely.
Or distant.
Yeah.
What does Christina say? The German manager I taught Italian to was very untypically German. No academic titles used. Open door policy. He had lived in many countries, though. The previous general manager, who was Italian, was very hierarchical. Yeah, Christina. I can see that. Well, and I don't know which German manager you taught Italian to, Christina. Chances are he may have been of a younger generation, or maybe from the southern parts of Germany. As you have noticed, not blonde, no blue eyes. Those of us in the south of Germany, there is some Mediterranean genes that were dropped on our territory a couple of 100 years ago. So that's why I talk with my hands, Christina.
It reminds me, I need to go and buy some new Mediterranean jeans. So,
Mediterranean jeans. Did I mispronounce it? Are you making fun of me?
No. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Another one in the bag.
Well, ciao, everybody. Cristina, grazie for watching. Ci vediamo. And, well, see you next time, people.
Okay. See you guys. Bye.